During my bedridden pregnancy, my mother-in-law secretly canceled my prenatal appointments, claiming I was faking it for attention. One night, I collapsed while she laughed from the kitchen. At the hospital, I overheard her telling my husband to prepare for a funeral because I was 31 and 6 months into a difficult pregnancy when I moved into my husband Mark's family home in Springfield, Missouri. The plan was for me to stay there while on strict bed rest. My OB had warned me. This pregnancy wasn't typical. I had chronic hypertension, and there were early signs of preeclampsia. I needed monitoring, weekly appointments, lots of rest, zero stress. Mark's mom, Diane, offered to help. She said, "I'll treat you like my own daughter." I thought I was lucky. Mark worked long shifts as a mechanic, and I couldn't even get out of bed without feeling faint. At first, Diane brought me meals, fluffed pillows, helped with laundry. But that lasted about a week.
Then the tone changed.
When I was pregnant, I didn't lay around like this. I was up at 6 a.m. scrubbing floors, she said one morning as she threw a piece of toast onto my lap. I laughed it off. But things got worse. When I missed my OB appointment that week, I asked her if she had the time wrong. She smiled and said, "They rescheduled it." I called. That happened again.
And again.
I was too tired, too sick, too foggy to keep track of dates or times myself. But something in my gut felt wrong. I tried calling the clinic. The nurse said, "We've left 3 voicemails asking why you keep canceling." I never canceled anything. When I told Diane what the nurse said, she shrugged. "Maybe you just forgot." Then she walked out of the room. One night, I was struggling to breathe. My vision was blotchy. My head pounded like it was splitting in two. I yelled for help, but Diane turned up the TV. I heard her laugh. I tried to get out of bed and blacked out halfway to the door. When I came to, I was in the ER with an oxygen mask on. The nurse said I had a hypertensive crisis and could have had a seizure. I was admitted for monitoring. I was lucky to be alive. But nothing prepared me for what I overheard in that hospital hallway. Diane was talking to Mark, unaware I could hear from the cracked door. Her voice was low but cold. "You need to prepare yourself. She won't make it through this. And honestly, maybe that's for the best.
She's weak."
A burden. Mark didn't respond. I laid there in that bed, numb, not just from the 4 drip, but from the betrayal that reached down to my bones. I wasn't crazy. She'd been sabotaging me, starving me, isolating me,
hoping I'd die.
That was the moment I knew. If I survived this, I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make her regret every word. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to share something like this, but I need to say it out loud. I need people to know what happened to me, because I almost didn't make it out alive. I was 31, pregnant with my first child, and completely vulnerable. My pregnancy was complicated from the beginning. I had high blood pressure, constant nausea, and dizzy spells that would come out of nowhere. At 5 months, my OB told me I needed strict bed rest, no driving, no cleaning, no stress. That scared me. I didn't have family nearby, and my husband Mark was working 10-hour days at the shop. We agreed I'd move into his parents' house just until the baby came. His mom, Diane, offered to help. At first, she was all smiles. She made it sound like she was excited to care for me. "We'll get you through this," she said. I wanted to believe her. The first few days were okay. She brought me soup, folded some laundry, and helped me to the bathroom when I felt too dizzy to walk. But it didn't last long. By week 2, the mood shifted. The warm tone disappeared. She started making comments. "You sure you're that sick?" I was pregnant during a heat wave in July. Never laid around all day. Doctors coddle women too much these days. I felt like a prisoner in that upstairs bedroom. I barely had the energy to sit up, let alone fight back. My phone charger went missing. The remote got lost. She started serving me smaller and smaller meals, dry toast, half a cup of soup. I was too tired to argue. Then I missed my OB appointment. I asked Diane if I had the wrong day. She said, "Oh, they called. Canceled it." That seemed off. I called the office later from Mark's phone when she wasn't around. The nurse sounded confused. She said, "You canceled yesterday." That happened 3 times. Every time, Diane said they canceled. But the clinic told me I had canceled. That's when I realized she was calling them, pretending to be me. She was keeping me from care. But I had no proof. Mark thought I was just confused. "Maybe the stress is messing with your memory," he said. Then came the night. I thought I was going to die. I hadn't eaten more than crackers all day. I couldn't see straight. I was dizzy, nauseous. My head felt like it was splitting open. I called out for Diane. She didn't answer. I heard the TV in the kitchen, loud, and her voice laughing at something. I tried to get up, but halfway to the bathroom I collapsed. I remember the floor, cold, dirty. I threw up, and everything went dark. I woke up in the hospital. The doctor told me I had dangerously high blood pressure. They said it was good I got there when I did, or I might have had a seizure or stroke. They asked why I hadn't been to my last few appointments. I told them the truth. Someone had been canceling them behind my back. Later that night, I was half awake in my hospital bed when I heard voices in the hallway. I recognized them, Mark and Diane. She said, "You need to prepare yourself. She's not going to make it through this." Then I heard her say, almost like she was annoyed, "And maybe that's for the best.
She's weak."
You don't need a woman like that dragging you down."
He didn't defend me.
He just sighed. I laid there in that bed, hooked up to monitors, wondering if I was crazy or just alone. I wasn't even sure if I was more heartbroken or scared. What kind of person says that while their daughter-in-law is fighting for her life? That's when I knew. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Diane had been trying to hurt me. She wanted me gone. And Mark? I didn't know what he believed anymore. But I promised myself something that night. If I lived through this, I'd never let it go. When I got out of the hospital, I didn't go back to Diane's house. I told the nurses everything about the canceled appointments, the lack of food, the way I collapsed while she sat in the kitchen laughing. They said they'd make a report to Adult Protective Services because I was considered a vulnerable adult under medical supervision.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Mark picked me up. He didn't say much. He looked tired, confused. I asked him if he believed me, if he believed his mother had been trying to hurt me. He didn't answer. We drove in silence. When he pulled into the driveway, I didn't move. I said, "I'm not going back in there." He turned to me and said, "She didn't mean any harm. She's just old school." That's when I knew. He was never going to be on my side. I had to go somewhere fast. I called a friend from work, Kendra, who lived across town. She came and picked me up, brought me to her apartment. It wasn't ideal, second floor walk up, no elevator, but it was safe. She gave me her bed, stocked her fridge, even came with me to appointments. She kept me alive. But Diane wasn't done with me. The hospital sent paperwork to my insurance, flagging potential abuse. Somehow, she found out. That's when the calls started. First to Mark, then to my friends, then to my job, saying I was lying, unstable, emotionally abusive to her son. She told anyone who would listen that I made up the hospital story for sympathy. Then, I got a call from a Child Protective Services investigator. Someone had made an anonymous report saying I was mentally unfit to be a mother, that I was endangering my unborn child, that I had faked a medical emergency. The timing was too perfect. It had to be her. The investigator visited Kendra's apartment, looked through the fridge, asked questions about my mental health, my plans for the baby. I handed over my medical records. My OB wrote a letter confirming I was following all recommendations and had nearly died from untreated preeclampsia. The investigator closed the case 2 weeks later. Unfounded. But the damage was already done. My reputation, my mental health, it was all unraveling. Mark still hadn't come to see me. I called him once, asked him why he wouldn't stand up for me. He said, "You're tearing this family apart." I was 8 months pregnant, alone, and trying to survive with a baby growing inside me and a target on my back. That's when I stopped waiting for someone to save me. I started documenting everything: texts, voicemails, medical reports, even the CPS case summary. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. But I knew one thing. She wasn't going to get away with it. Not after what she did. And especially not after what she tried to do next. About a month before my due date, something unexpected happened. I got a call from Diane's neighbor, a woman I barely knew, Mrs. Henley. We'd met once at a barbecue. She said, "I know this is out of line, but I think you should know something." I sat down. She told me she'd overheard Diane on the phone. Loud, bragging, drunk. Saying how she'd handled the girl problem and might be raising a grandbaby alone soon. Mrs. Henley thought it was just weird drunken talk at first, but after she saw an ambulance show up the same night I collapsed, it all clicked. She said she wished she had called someone sooner. I thanked her, hung up, and cried. Someone else heard it. It wasn't just me. I added her statement to my growing file. Then Kendra came home from work one night, pale and shaking. "You're not going to believe this," she said. She'd overheard a coworker, one of Mark's friends, laughing in the break room about how Mark's mom tried to scare the wife into a miscarriage to get rid of her. The story was spreading. Diane was treating it like a joke. Mark? He hadn't contacted me once. Not even to ask about the baby. My heart ached, but I stopped pretending. I knew who they were now. Then my OB told me something else, something that sent chills down my spine. There were signs on my scan that the baby had gone days without proper nutrition. That wasn't just the preeclampsia. That was from the weeks I was barely fed in Diane's house. "You're lucky," he said. "The baby is small but stable. Another week in that condition, and it could have been a different outcome." That night, I made a copy of every piece of documentation. I stored it in a cloud drive. I sent it to Kendra, my sister in Chicago, and even my old boss. I wanted it to live somewhere beyond me. Because if something did happen to me during delivery, I needed the truth to survive. 2 weeks later, I went into labor early. I didn't call Mark. I didn't want him there. Kendra came with me. It was long, painful, complicated. I lost a lot of blood. They had to use an emergency vacuum to assist. But in the end, my baby boy was born crying and breathing. They placed him on my chest, and I broke down. He was here. He was real. And he was mine. But what I didn't know, what no one told me, was that while I was in labor, Diane had shown up at the hospital demanding to be listed as next of kin and to be allowed in the room. She told the nurse that I was mentally unstable and she needed to monitor the baby's safety. Thankfully, the hospital had already flagged my file for restricted access due to the prior APS and CPS reports. Security escorted her out. I found out only after I'd been moved to recovery. They showed me the log. There she was, Diane Whitlow, barred from maternity and NICU access. I looked at my sleeping baby and knew this wasn't over. She had tried everything, and she had failed. But I hadn't even started yet. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days after giving birth. I didn't tell anyone except Kendra and my sister. Mark didn't even know he had a son yet. The nurse asked me if I wanted to add the father's name to the birth certificate. I said no. 2 weeks later, I filed for sole custody and protective orders against both Mark and Diane. The documentation I'd collected, the canceled appointments, the hospital records, the CPS false report, Mrs. Henley's statement, and the security report from the hospital, made it easier than I thought. My lawyer said, "This isn't just custody. This is a case of attempted medical abuse and coercion." I didn't need him to say it. I already knew. Mark tried to contact me then. Suddenly, he cared. He sent a few texts, all the same. "Why are you doing this? He's my son, too." Not one word about what he allowed to happen. Not one apology. I didn't reply. The court granted full custody and no visitation. Diane was barred from any contact or communication. A few weeks later, an officer served Mark with the order. I watched from the window while holding my son. It still wasn't enough. I reached out to Diane's church. I sent them copies of the hospital and APS reports. I included the audio clip I recorded. Yes, I had finally remembered to record her the last time she left a hateful voicemail calling me the manipulative little actress. She'd been a leader in the women's ministry. That ended real quick. I also wrote a letter to the mechanic shop where Mark worked. I didn't lie, I told the truth. That while I was nearly dying from untreated preeclampsia, he sat silently as his mother said, "Maybe it's for the best." He lost his job 2 weeks later. Turns out, the owner's wife had gone through a high-risk pregnancy herself. He said he didn't want a man like that representing his business. Kendra and I started a small online fundraiser after that. Not out of pity, but because people kept asking if they could help. I told my story honestly, just like I'm telling it here. It went viral. Thousands of women commented, nurses, mothers, even a few doulas, saying they'd seen women go through similar things, but no one ever believed them. That fundraiser paid for a new apartment. It paid for childcare, so I could go back to work. It helped me breathe again. As for Diane, word got around. Mrs. Henley told me she hardly leaves the house now. No more ladies' luncheons. No more bragging. No more playing the perfect mother-in-law. Her mask fell off and no one bought the act anymore. But the real revenge? It's quiet. It's in the way my son grabs my finger with his tiny hand when he sleeps. It's in the way I walk into a doctor's office now and ask every question I want without fear. It's knowing I was supposed to be erased, and instead, I survived. I made sure they can never touch us again. And that's more than justice. That's freedom.